Hello, everyone here in person and online. So glad to see you. My name is Judith Weiner. I'm the program manager here at Ollie at BCC, and I'm so glad to see you this afternoon. I have a few short announcements and then we'll get started. I encourage you to go to berkshireollie.org/events to see our full calendar of upcoming programming. I'm going to highlight just a couple of things, but we have a lot of programming that is online now and that is going to be put up in the next week or two. Really look out for some amazing programs. This afternoon, right after this, we have a free live stream and screening of a panel discussion on the American Revolution series with Sarah Botstein, Christopher Brown, and Christian Crouch, all producers and directors of the documentary on PBS. That is today at 5 p.m. It is not too late to sign up, but I will say this program is not recorded, so sign up and watch it live. This is offered together with Bard College and Bard Lifelong Learning Institute. And this coming Saturday and Sunday, we have another reading by our Ollie players. And the play is On the Verge, or The Geography of Yearning by Eric Overmeyer, and it is under the direction of Dr. Jeannie Marlin Woods. And I've heard wonderful things about this play. There are two shows, one on Saturday night at 7, one on Sunday at 2 p.m., and it will be at the Unicorn Theatre in Stockbridge. Buy tickets. Tickets are free. Get tickets online through us. You can do it online or you can call the office. And our Ollie annual meeting and ice cream social, very important, the ice cream part, is Thursday, May 21st at 2 p.m. at BCC. And the meeting will also be available on Zoom, but not ice cream, just the meeting. More programs are posted for the end of May and into June at berkshireollie.org/events. And Summer 1 classes, believe it or not, are coming up and they will begin on June 8th, Summer 2 on July 13th. Registration will open in May. Now I'm going to introduce Laurie Martinelli. She retired 2 years ago, returning to her hometown of Dalton after living and working in Boston for 35 years with degrees in law and public health. Ms. Martinelli dedicated her career to advocating for underserved and marginalized people seeking access to legal, housing, and healthcare services. Her public interest career includes staff attorney with the Arizona Farm Workers Union, policy director at Mass Audubon, and executive director of two nonprofit organizations, Health Law Advocates and the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Massachusetts. And now I'm going to turn things over to Laurie for this really interesting talk about Cuba.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for coming, for people live and people online. I appreciate the opportunity to share my photos and my stories. Thank you to Ollie for making this possible. So a brief introduction to Cuba. Cuba is an extraordinary country. It's extraordinary not only because of its natural beauty, but also because of the irrepressible spirit of the Cuban people. This slender 740-mile-long island with approximately 11 million people is home to rugged mountains, biosphere reserves, forests, lakes, waterfalls, white sand beaches, and a remote coastline that offers unique opportunities to view nature. Much of the country's wild area is protected through a network of 250 national parks and reserves, protecting 20% of Cuba's land and water. Cuba has a magnificent mild subtropical climate of year-round temperatures averaging 75 to 80 degrees. Its dry season is from November to April and rainy season from May to October, with high humidity and potential for hurricanes from June to November. 90% of the Cuban people live in poverty. 90%. Driven by high inflation, food shortages, low incomes, and failing public services. A major contributing factor is the U.S. embargo. Imposed in 1959 by President Eisenhower, the initial embargo was imposed when then the new government of Fidel Castro nationalized the industrial and agricultural sectors. But in 1962, President John F. Kennedy signed a full embargo proclamation, and that embargo exists to this day and continues to have a profoundly negative impact on every aspect of Cuban life, preventing trade, food, medicine, and humanitarian aid from reaching Cuba. Here's how the embargo works. No American company can do business in Cuba. So if you're a tourist in Cuba, you have to bring cash because Visa and MasterCard are prohibited from processing any transaction from Cuba. So you have to travel with cash, and actually they prefer cash. In fact, Intrepid Traveler, who was our tour guide, advised us just to bring cash. And people who came from Europe brought the euro. Cash is the preferred payment. If you go to a restaurant and you pay in cash, you'll get your change back in pesos because they want those dollars. They're not going to let those dollars go. Wi-Fi access is very limited in Cuba. There are Wi-Fi stores and hotels where you can buy a SIM card and get an hour of Wi-Fi access, but it's very unreliable. Occasionally, we would find a working hotspot but don't count on your cell phone if you're traveling to Cuba. Cubans who do have Wi-Fi access are limited only to access Cuban internet sites. So it's tough with the Wi-Fi. However, in the face of long-standing economic, political, and social hardship, Cubans maintain an incredibly positive, can-do attitude and a profound capacity for joy and humor and resilience. So I'm going to move forward. And what's going on here?
Is it not working?
Nope. So can you go to the next slide? Hitting it, right? Yeah, okay. Oops. Oh geez, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, here we go. Okay, so here I am. Welcome to the large international airport in Havana. So you can travel now directly to Cuba. You know, for years you had to go through Mexico or Canada, but now you can fly directly. We flew from Miami to Havana on American Airlines. It's a 45-minute flight. And here we are in the airport. It's a very modest airport, very clean, but I did not see one computer in the entire airport. In fact, customs consisted of 2 card tables set up with people sitting behind them and checking our documents. And everything was with pens and papers. You do need a visa to travel to Cuba. There are several visa categories, visas, and you get them online. Visas for a visiting family, visas for academia, visas for working. We were eligible for a visa for support of the Cuban people, an individual that promotes independent activity intended to strengthen civil society in Cuba. And per these requirements of the State Department, we had to maintain a travel log. And we have to keep that for 5 years. I don't know, maybe the State Department's going to come knock on my door and ask. That's a requirement. Okay, so now we're driving into the city, and this is my first Cuban story. I like to talk to people when I was in Cuba because I get to practice my Spanish and I get to learn about their life. So this is Alex. He was our cab driver, and here's his story. He has 4 generations living in his house. His parents, his wife, his daughter, his son-in-law, and 2 grandchildren. He's lucky, however, because he has a contract with Intrepid Traveler. That's the tour outfit that we work with. And he transports people into the city. It's $25 cash plus a $5 tip. So for $30, he's making more than what most people make in more than 2 months. So he is in a really good place. And you can see how tough it is for everyone else. So this half-hour ride into Havana was an eye-opener. And what I immediately noticed was poor road infrastructure, giant potholes, cracked and crumbled pavements. And Alex, another thing about him, he wasn't at all shy about complaining about the condition of the country. In fact, I remember him rolling down his window and pointing outside at some broken piece of sidewalk or highway saying, 65 years after the revolution, and this is what we have. So we did see some cars, certainly not a lot of motorcycles. And as we entered Havana, you could see once beautiful monuments, grandiose churches and plazas, but many neighborhoods were visibly shabby with decayed and crumbling buildings, broken sidewalks. No, I think there's maybe two traffic lights in Havana, no street lights. So we always learn to walk at night with our headlamps or our phone, for lights. Most distressing in Havana is giant piles of garbage. And I mean giant. You know how we had snow piles this winter, 12, 15 feet high? They have those in many of the streets in Havana. And I'm sure it's gotten worse. Okay, so here's some more of the buildings. This is in Havana. You see them very decayed. And then Alex pulls up and says, okay, this is where you're getting out. And this was our first night lodging, but he said, don't worry, the inside of the building looks much nicer than the outside, and it was true. And here was my room, and this is a typical room, very modest, very clean. This was our patio where we ate our breakfast. So yeah, the outside is deceiving, but the inside was much nicer. And I want to talk about the biking aspect of this because this was, after all, a cycling trip. We traveled in this bus, this bus from China, which was a beautiful bus, air conditioned, very clean. There were 13 people on our tour. There were 6 Americans, 2 British couples, 1 couple from Dublin, and 1 solo traveler, a Polish woman who was a physician living in London. Intrepid Traveler is an experienced global tour operator. They lead many trips to Cuba. Right now they're suspended, but Cuba was one of their most popular destinations. And not just cycling, they did cultural tours and walking tours. And I think they did about 2 cycling tours a month. And so every day, the other thing I want to say about Intrepid Traveler, their philosophy is to bring tourist dollars to the Cuban people. And you'll see how that worked out during the course of the trip. So we biked every day for 4 or 5 hours. The afternoons were dedicated to sightseeing. So after we would do the biking, we would climb back on the bus, and they would take us to various landmarks and historic monuments. So this is just a quick map. I guess I can't leave, but you can see in the pink at the top there's Havana. The first week we traveled to the west of Havana. We went to Vinales and Suaro. And the second week we traveled to the east of Havana, but only really through the central part of the country. Trinidad, Santa Clara, and you'll see some photos from that area. And we had giant bikes. So the bikes were part of the program. We didn't have to bring our bikes, and they were all in very good working order. It had a triple gear, so if there was any climbing, it was fairly easy to do. And there weren't any mechanical problems, which was really amazing. And the neatest thing was they loaded the bikes up underneath the bus in the luggage storage area. So it was very efficient. In the morning, they would take the bikes out. In the morning, they would take the bikes out. And then at the end of the day, we would wheel the bikes back in and off we went. So it was very cool. Now, these are our fearless leaders. I just want to talk to you about more stories. Rainer in the green shirt is 42 years old, a single guy. He used to be a school teacher, but he left teaching years ago because he can make more money being a tour guide. He's been a tour guide for Intrepid Traveler for about 10 years. He's never left the island. He's never left Cuba. He's cycled all over the island. He told us, I know every single pothole in Cuba, and there are many. But he was great. He was a great leader. Next to him is Carlos. Carlos was our chauffeur, our bus driver, and he was an excellent bus driver because the roads that he had to navigate with crevasses and cracks and boulder, I mean, it was quite something. So he was an excellent driver. And the third guy in black there is Nariel. Nariel was our bike mechanic and sweep. Sweep means he rode in the back of the group so that we wouldn't lose anyone. And again, I said that we didn't have many problems with the bikes, but they have a few flats. And I remember having a couple flats, and he fixed them instantly. But the other thing I noticed is as he swapped out the old tube for the new tube, there were no fewer than 5 patches on the new tube that was going in. And so the lesson there is Cubans don't waste anything. If you go to the store and you buy a souvenir, the bag they give you, you're noticing it's got writing on it because it's a piece of paper from the office that they tape together or they staple together. I mean, they do not waste anything in Cuba because they have so little. Okay, now these next photos, and I'm going to go through them quickly. This was really biking. We left Havana after one day. We spent one night in Havana, and then we really were in the country. And these are this is what the countryside looks like on the bikes. There we are. There's our group. I think this must be after the ride. We're getting ready to load them up underneath. After 10 or 12 miles, we would take a break. We would pull over on the side of the road. We'd get our water, or we'd have some fruit or a snack. It was very hot, but it wasn't humid. It was really a mild, like 78, 79 degrees, but you do have to stay hydrated. And sometimes we were able to stop at little cafes on the side of the road as well. And then here's just some of the scenery. It's just breathtaking. I'm just going to go through these photos rather quickly. Not a lot of cars, a lot of agriculture, a lot of green, you know, mountains in the background. Oh, those trees, those are the royal palm. That is the national tree of Cuba. You see them everywhere. It's a beautiful, beautiful tree. And here we are. My favorite place is the beaches, the white sand beaches, turquoise water, just beautiful. Here I am with my buddy Jimmy. This was a long day. We cycled to the beach, but it was worth it because when we got there, we got to go swimming. And, oh, I want to just go here. Then we got to have lunch on the beach. So we had grilled fish and we had grilled lobster. So that was a real treat. And I put this fish here. This is the picture of the grilled fish, which was tasty, but I have the head there because I wanted to let you know that Nariel, Rainer, and Carlos all fought who was going to get to eat the head. Yeah, a lot of fishing. And again, these are just some more beach shots, just beautiful beaches. Veradero, that is a very popular coastal town, just about a half an hour outside of Havana. Okay, now those are 5 happy cyclists right there. We spent the day cycling. Beautiful weather, every day was beautiful, beautiful temperature. The water was warm, but to the Cubans, it's cold because it's their winter. You know, we thought it was wonderful because it was powdery sand. It was beautiful. Nice snorkeling, coral reefs. Yeah, oh boy. They do have, some of the towns have these big all-inclusive resorts. US tourists aren't allowed to go into those because again, with that embargo, we can't go in and conduct any business there. But there's a lot of tourists, especially from Canada, who go into these all-inclusives. It includes your airfare, your lodging, your food, your entertainment. It's all like for $800. I mean, it's amazing. So there's a lot of these in some communities. Okay, now I'm going to talk about our housing situation, because this was another great opportunity to experience life from a Cuban perspective. And we stayed in Casa Particulares. And a Casa Particulare, think of it as like an Airbnb. So since 2011, Cubans are able to open up their homes and really rent rooms to guests. So it's a great way for tourists to see what it's like living in Cuba, and it's vital for the Cuban people to get that cash, because again, they want the dollar cash, even they had to pay in cash. And and also I found out that you can get a Casa Particulare app. So if you are planning to go to Cuba in the future, you can get a Casa Particulare app and map out where you want to go. Intrepid Traveler has contracts with casa hosts throughout Cuba. So this is part of the philosophy of trying to spread the money throughout Cuba. Our package included 14 nights in Casa Particulares. So we were changing nights, every night we were changing locations, and it would include breakfast. If you got anything extra, sometimes the meal wasn't covered and we had to pay for the meal, $15, again, all in cash. You pay your tip, your room tip. If you got a beer, it was $2. It really was a good deal, but for the homeowner, it was really important that they had this source of income. And they had, like Airbnb, these homes have to meet health and safety standards, you know, to be able to offer them as Casa Particulares. Well, this is my favorite one. This is just one night out of Havana. This was a lovely little farm, a little cabana, and I had my own, my little room was in there. And I'll show you, there's my room. Again, they're all just very similar, but very modest, very clean. The bathroom, we had hot water the whole time, which was great. And here is the view, sipping a beer after my bike ride out of my casita. Isn't that beautiful? And then this is the owner. I just want to share some stories about the owner. Anna and her father Rodolfo owned this casa, and they would serve breakfast in the morning behind them on the table. We had an early morning breakfast at 6:30 because we needed to be on the bus every day at 7:30 because we wanted to get an early bike start, because, well, we usually had to drive to the start of our bike ride, and we wanted to get in before before 1 or 2 or 3 in the afternoon when it gets really hot. Okay, so this is another neat thing that we did in these Casa Particulares. Sometimes they would offer dinner, and we would sit down for family style dinners. They cost like $15. Again, this is cash that the Casa hosts receive, which is very helpful. But you can see food was abundant in Cuba. You know, you hear stories about, oh, you're gonna eat rice and beans. Well, yeah, you eat rice and beans, the best rice and beans you've ever eaten. I would eat them every day for the rest of my life. Black beans and rice to die for, but also a lot of vegetables. They served a lot of meat, chicken and pork and sometimes fish if we were near the ocean. They grilled, the meat was cooked deliciously. It was grilled and it was in a stew, a lot of vegetables, tomatoes, avocados, cassava, sweet potatoes, malanga, which is a starchy root vegetable, plantains for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Plantains is a staple. Okay, so that was the food, as I said, was a big surprise. It was very good. And here's just some glimpses of some of the casa owners. So this is Papito and his sister, and you can see his casa home behind him. Because there were 13 of us, we all couldn't fit in one home, so we would split up between 2 or 3 casas, but we would be in the same neighborhood. And so there's Papito, there's his wife Juno. They were so proud to show us their little farm in the back of their house. And Papito, I don't know if you can see, but he's holding this giant machete, and he chopped off, he found a piece of sugar cane and he chopped off a branch, and he gave us a piece of stick to suck on, so I never had that before. So here's a few more stories. This is Rosario. This is another casa we stayed in. Rosario is a retired dentist. Her husband is a retired physician, yet they still cannot make ends meet. So they have to take in casa guests. And they told me that their son is also a physician, and he lives in North Carolina where he drives Ubers. Didn't get into what the immigration status was, but that's that. Now this is Sylvia. Sylvia, she didn't own her casa, she was a manager, and she'd been managed it for years. The owner was a woman in Havana. This is Veradero. This is the one that's the coastal tourist town close to Havana. And Sylvia was lovely. She rode a little scooter. She lived in the next town. She rode a little scooter in every day. And then she would, you know, prepare our breakfast, or if we had laundry to do. Oh, I was going to say that these homes, I don't think represent most typical Cuban homes, because they had a lot of appliances like washing machines, which I don't think most people have. And I know they have washing machines because every few days I'd give them a pile of clothes and ask them if they would wash them. And for $4 or $5, I got all my clothes washed and folded and returned. So Sylvia's story is that she's been doing this for several years. It works out well. She told me that her 24-year-old son recently moved to Buffalo, New York. And he lives with his father, and the two of them work in a furniture factory. And she said she's grateful that he's living because they're in the US, because he's able to send her money, which is more than she can ever make as a manager of a casa. She also spoke about the frequent blackouts in her neighborhood that were happening for longer duration and more frequent. But yeah. So in general, I would say one of the themes that we had is people want to leave Cuba because the economy is so difficult. You can't make ends meet. And we found that a lot of people have family members in Spain. So that seemed to be the most obvious place to go. And we did meet several people who are in the process of filling out visas and getting their passport so that they could immigrate to Spain. One thing that Intrepid Traveler did, which I really liked, is they brought us into the store. So this is Rainer, and while we were biking or we were walking on a tour in the city, he would bring us into the stores so we could see what it was like to live and try to make ends meet in Cuba. So let me just go over some of these prices. So I mentioned that the average salary for a month is 3,500 to 5,000 pesos. Did I mention that? Well, there it is, which equals $12.50. $1 equals 450 pesos, and I'm sure inflation is much higher now than it was then. So in these, some of the prices in this store, so you have 5,000 pesos, más o menos a month, and you got a can of beans for 400 pesos, an avocado for 75 pesos, a bag of rice for 120 pesos. You can see where you can't make ends meet. And I might add that all the stores we visited had empty shelves in the medication pharmacy section because no US pharmaceutical company is allowed to sell so these people are suffering. For 67 years, this embargo has been in place, so, yeah. So, yeah. But I want to say another thing about Intrepid Traveler that I liked is that they really focused on tipping Tipping is a vital source of income since Cubans are paid so poorly compared to other countries. So when you travel with Intrepid Traveler, they post a list of acceptable tips for various activities, taxis, restaurants. When you're in a casa, you leave a room tip. Even when you use a public restroom, you usually have to tip people. And they recommend that you travel with small denominations, so that, people can use what you give them. These next slides, these are all still on the bike, and this is outside of Cuba, so outside of Havana, this is rural Cuba, and you'll see this is the most popular form of transportation, the horse and buggy. And you see very creative ways. Who knows? This might be public transportation for that little town. You don't see many cars. I mean, there are cars for sure, but this is the most popular form of transportation, people's horses. This was biking along. We always saw farmers or workers, and they were always very friendly. We said hello to everyone. Here's just some other scenes. Sometimes the roads we were on were hard packed, they weren't paved. And if it was paved, there was a lot of cracked pavement, believe me. But we had the thicker tires, our bikes were. And this guy was cool. This was a young entrepreneur. You can see his horse and his beat up cart, and he put pineapples in that cart. And he just set up on the side of the road, and he was selling pineapples. And he hit the jackpot when our bus stopped, because out ran our three guys, and they bought a dozen pineapples because they were providing them for all the casas that we were stopping at. So I thought that was pretty cool. You also see a lot of farm animals just tethered to the side of the road and grazing, which I guess is free grazing for their cows or cattle or what have you. You see a lot of motor scooters, a lot of motorcycles and scooters, and I think a lot of them were electric. I think they get a lot from China, but I don't know that for sure. And some bicycles. Okay, so now that was our biking, and that went on every morning, I said, for the 2 weeks. And then after lunch, we typically would climb back in the bus and we would we'd go visit some tourist site. And so I'm just going to show you some of those. This is in Suaro, which is an area about 40 miles west of Cuba. It's a small oasis with incredible natural beauty, amazing trees, rivers, wetlands. And we visited the Suaro Orchid Garden, which is a botanical garden with 18,000 species of native and non-native orchids. I mean, we were sort of bummed out about going to a botanical garden, but it was fascinating. I mean, I don't have all the pictures, but it was just a beautiful place. We spent several hours there. Another day, we went to this UNESCO eco-village biosphere called Comunidad Las Terrazas. And this is on a field that was formerly farmed as a coffee plantation. And as part of Fidel Castro's Green Revolution, he reforested this area, and he also set about educating and rehousing the illiterate workforce from the coffee plantation. And so we visited Las Terrazas one afternoon. Beautiful. I just want to say a bit about literacy, because hearing that about the illiterate farm workers. In the decades following the revolution, the Cubans launched a massive education campaign, training teachers, building schools, really prioritizing education. And as a result, Cuba became the first and only Latin American country to have 100% literacy, which is amazing, 100% literacy. Now, that's not the case now today. I mean, they've suffered, but I was looking at the best data I could get information was from the World Bank. In 2022, they had a 95% literacy rate, and today Costa Rica has the highest literacy rate in Latin America at 98%. Okay, we went and visited tobacco farms, because tobacco farms and cigar factories in Cuba are popular tourist attractions. And we visited this small tobacco farm where we met Efron, who showed us how to make tobacco, and then he actually rolled a cigar for us. Mm-hmm. So drying tobacco leaves, briefly, involves a 6 to 8 week air curing process in ventilated barns where harvested leaves are hung. You can see them hung on the racks. Then they turn from green to brown while losing 85% of their moisture. The leaves are tied in pairs, hung on racks, and managed by controlling humidity and temperature, which preserves the leaf structure and developing the flavor. So after he did the presentation, we spent the afternoon smoking cigars. Who would think? We had so much fun smoking cigars. All of us did. We stayed there for hours. And of course, you're not supposed to inhale. And if you do, that's what happened. But yeah, that was fun. Of course, as an American tourist, we're not allowed to bring Cuban cigars back to the US. Rum, we can't bring anything back, really. So, the other thing about the tobacco farm, they serve it with rum, which rum is available at a lot of places because apparently rum goes along with smoking cigars, and pairing rum with the different flavors and quality cigars is an exact science. We did learn that. Okay, another day in the afternoon, we followed a long pothole-filled road to Cuevos de los Portales, which is the cave of the portals, where legendary Ernesto Che Guevara stayed with a military battalion during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. And this was an amazing network of caves, large caves, and vast underground areas. At this time, Cuba was anticipating a full-scale invasion by the US, and Che believed that the caves would be a good place to hide and plan an offensive strike. This is a national monument. Okay, so that's our first week, and now we're back on the second week. And the second week, we visited some of the major tourist attractions in Cuba. Sam, you might have heard of some of these places: Cienfuegos, Santa Clara, Trinidad, Veradero. And I'm just going to go through some of the photos because these towns are just incredibly beautiful. Cienfuegos was selected by UNESCO in 2005 for both the beauty of its French-style architecture and the ingenuity of its urban planning, which was considered highly progressive in the 19th century. Wide streets and two-lane boulevards. Oh, thankfully, we did not see large piles of garbage once we left Havana. So, and I remember this town, particularly Cienfuegos, was immaculate. And I remember talking to a woman at the market, and she said, oh, we have a very active volunteer group. They're sweeping the plaza, picking up garbage, and they really pay a lot of attention to it. And you could really see that in this town. Sports is an important part of Cuban life. Kids rollerblading, playing baseball and basketball. We met a man who was a wrestling coach. He was training his team for an international boxing competition. And then when I thought about this boxing, I remember Cuban boxing, so I did a little bit of research, and I found out that Cuba is the most successful Latin American country in the history of the Olympics, winning more medals in various sports, boxing, wrestling, judo, and volleyball, than any other Latin American country. And the guy I was thinking of, the Cuban GOAT, have you guys heard of Tito Stevenson? He was a heavyweight boxer who won 3 Olympic gold medals. And he was very popular from 66 to 86. But why is Cuba an Olympic powerhouse? Because the Cuban Revolution did elevate physical fitness to a new height. There was a state-driven program called INDER, which is the National Institute of Sport, Phys Ed, and Recreation. And that was created to really nurture and train athletes and identify students who are interested. They created summer camps, summer sports camps. They built a whole array of sports facilities throughout the country, including in rural areas. And you can see that in how Cuba's results in the Olympics. Art is another important priority in Cuba. All cities and towns have an art center, which is free for all children. And so we visited a couple of these, and you can see how engaged these kids are, whether it's drawing, painting, sculpture. They also offer music, theater, dance. All these art centers are free, and they really are to promote the arts and Cuban culture. Okay, now we're in Trinidad, which is Cuba's second biggest tourist attraction after Havana. And this old city is perfectly preserved in a colonial time capsule. This 19th century beautiful Plaza Mayor is free of traffic and ringed by historic buildings. There was, we spent most of our time in the old part of Trinidad. It's a beautiful city. And we sat in one of the cafes on this plaza, sipping a drink, listening to music. And the street light, I remember, is amazing in Trinidad. It's not unusual to see domino games, wandering troubadours, makeshift baseball and other sports, ceramics and pottery, outstanding restaurants and music venues. And so we just happened to stop at this restaurant. It was called the Bistro Latin Jazz, and there was really nice music coming out of it. You can see in the back, there's a guy playing the piano with a beard, and the woman played the saxophone and the clarinet. She was awesome. And I found out later from our travel book that this was a recommended restaurant in Trinidad because the food was excellent. And I just wanted to dispel this myth, because this was something I thought that that Cuba doesn't have a rich restaurant scene, but it really does. Cuba has a very robust restaurant scene. Of course, this isn't today, right now, this is up until the recent past, but rooftop dining with live music, excellent culinary options in Asian, Afro-Cuban, Italian. They have quaint coffee shops, luxury brunch options, funky restaurants serving vegan pizza, hamburgers. This guidebook has pages and pages of restaurants in all the different tourist places. So that was something new for me. I wasn't expecting that. Now we're visiting Santa Clara, which is where they won the revolution, and there's a wonderful Che Guevara mausoleum there, which is a grandiose plaza. This is a must-see. This is a real big tourist stop. A grandiose plaza dominated by a bronze statue of Che atop a 16-meter pedestal. When Che's remains were returned to Cuba from Bolivia in 1997, 30 years after his death, Fidel Castro, he memorialized Che, and he lit an eternal flame. So this is now a national monument. We got there at 5 o'clock, so we couldn't go inside, but we did walk outside, and it was amazing. The other thing about Santa Clara that is interesting is it is the birthplace of Cuba's flamboyant LGBTQ scene. And the marriage and adoption equality referendum passed in 2022 in Cuba with the highest support in human history. 67% of Cubans said yes. Okay, the last, I'm nearing the end, you guys. I know I talk fast. I got a lot to say. And it's, yeah. So this is classic Cuban cars, because this is another huge area of tourism in Cuba. There's about 60,000 classic automobiles in Cuba. The biggest concentration of them are lined up in Havana's Parque Central, which resembles a classic car museum with rows of squeaky clean autos, vintage cars, cherry red Chevrolets, green Plymouths, Fords, and Buicks. And while the exteriors epitomize the nostalgic beauty of 1950s vintage automobiles, what lurks under the hood is a very different story. We heard one man tell us about a man who drives a Pañolta. He calls it his Pañolta, which is a green Pontiac that he retrofitted with a Toyota Helix 1998 engine. The suspension and brakes are from a 2008 Mitsubishi Montero Sport, and the fan belt is swapped with a Russian Lada. And his vehicle has, that's not him, by the way, he's on our tour, but it has 500,000 miles and it's still going strong. They take such care of these vehicles. We heard another story of a vintage car that was reborn with a boat engine. So these classic cars with mismatched parts and scrap metal are another testament to the determination and resolve of Cubans, who forever find ways to persevere against insurmountable odds. So now ending our tour, this is some people on our, you can, for $25, you can rent a car for an hour, and it's a lot of fun. You can drive wherever you want to go. And here's some people in our group in their classic car. Okay, so now we're back in Havana. There's 3 sections of Havana. We spent our time in Old Havana, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's partly restored, partly disheveled, and it's home to more than 90,000 Cubans. Old Havana is where the city was founded in 1519 and where it prospered for 3 centuries, protected by a long wall and a sophisticated network of forts. And so I'm just going to share some of my memories walking through Havana because it really is a beautiful city. This is the Malecon, which is the seawall. It goes for 7 miles, 7 kilometers rather, and it's a sidewalk that takes you through the city, past iconic monuments and buildings. And its films have been shot at the seawall. Other special moments like first kiss, quinceañero celebrations, lots of people fishing, street poets, runners. There's a lot of people who gather at the Malecon. And now we're walking through some of the neighborhoods in Old Havana, and I can tell you that hanging laundry is something that every apartment and home has. They don't have dryers, they hang their laundry, so they're out everywhere. The main drag in this old Havana is Calle Obispo, which is brimming with local and tourist activities, charming streets with shops, restaurants, and mini museums. Some neighborhoods had no vehicular traffic, making the city very walkable. You hear loud and animated street life, vendors yelling to sell their goods, ice cream, sweets, what have you, hustlers looking for a handout. Moms would approach you with babies asking you for money. But I must tell you, Havana is extremely safe. All of Cuba is extremely safe. None of us ever felt threatened at all. And we were being pestered by these street hustlers, Rainer, our tour guide, would say, look, they're part of a tour, leave them alone. And the people would politely turn away and walk away. So yeah, it's a very safe country. This is Anna. We took a 3-hour walking tour, but she was so delightful and ended up being a 4-hour tour. She is 27 years old. She's a college professor from the University of Havana, where she teaches history and philosophy. With her perfect English, as I said, she brought us on a 4-hour walking tour, and we got to learn a little bit about her. Her situation is she lives with her parents. She has to work on the weekends. She needs those dollars for tips because the salary she makes as a college professor is not enough. So her mother wants her to emigrate to Spain. They have relatives there, but she doesn't want to leave her parents because she's worried how are they going to make it. So she's really stuck here in Havana. But the tour that she brought us on, you can see what old Havana is like. It's just a beautiful city. Just has a few photos here. There are historic monuments, dozens of museums, 20 restored hotels, legendary bars, numerous art galleries. You see pharmacies with elegant chandeliers and shelves of ceramic jars. Now this guy, this is Jose Marti. I had never heard of Jose Marti. Oh, there it is. Okay, he's gone. So he is a Cuban national hero who led the movement for Cuba's independence from Spain. He died in 1895 in a battle, but he is memorialized and exists in statue in every single city and town in Cuba. He was a philosopher, a poet, a journalist, an essayist, a professor. He is revered for his literary contributions and ideals of liberty and democracy. So there you have Jose Marti. And that's one of the pharmacies I mentioned with the chandeliers, the old cash register, the ceramic jars. Now this is interesting. I have never heard of the special period in Cuba. Have you? The special period? People talk about the special period. Apparently it refers to the years following the 1991 collapse of the Soviet Union, a time of extreme rationing, energy conservation, and in some instances, near famine conditions due to the loss of food imports. In a very short time, Cuba lost the Soviet Union, its major trading partner, and as a result, its GDP shrank by 35% and imports and exports fell by 80%. So this large statue is located on Plaza Viaje. It's called Vieja, the old plaza, and it's called Viaje Fantástico, the fantastic voyage. And it's a large sculpture of a naked woman with high heels riding a massive rooster and holding a large fork. How do you like that? There's many interpretations, and I'm going to share with you the one I like best. Because the rooster generally symbolizes Cuban pride, heritage, and male machismo, the woman riding the rooster is a powerful message of the necessary transformation that took place during the special period, empowering women to take control of their destiny, with the fork representing the quest for food and sustenance. So there you have it, the special period. And they talk about the special period when you're in Cuba. So another big treat in Havana is we got to go to the Buena Vista Social Club, which is a legendary private nightclub popular in Havana from the 30s to the 50s. And you might recall in 1996, a graduate student launched an ambitious music project that brought the forgotten veteran Cuban musicians to international fame. An album was released in 1996, followed by an Oscar-nominated documentary of the same name. So we got front row seats. Here's pretty much everyone from our tour wanted to go. It was a steep price. It was $60 for Cuba, is a lot of money, but that included our meal, appetizer, main meal, and dessert, 3 mixed drinks, and their mixed drinks all have a lot of rum in them. So this place got very rowdy. And then 3 hours of entertainment, which was just incredible. And there was a host who introduced various performers, traditional Cuban music, a blend of African-rooted percussion with American jazz influence. This whole effort, this Buena Vista Social Club revived the musical genres of the son, the danzón, the bolero, and sparked a new interest in Latin American music. I remember the exuberance of the salsa dancers and the sparkling costumes they had. Honestly, I could have stayed there all night watching them. It was so beautiful. Okay, and then this actually happened. On my bucket list for Cuba were 2 things: playing dominoes with Cubans and salsa dancing with Cubans. Okay. And so this was after we left the Buena Vista Social Club. We're waiting for our taxi, and I was able to sit in on this domino game. And not for long, but you can see this. You see this a lot. No drinking. These are just serious domino players. And I got to sit in. And the guy standing, he's the one who let me sit in. He kept pointing to the guy across from me. He goes, "Es tu amigo, and he's your friend." I'm like, what? I guess you pay with teams. I don't really know how that works. But anyways, it was a lot of fun. We looked very serious. This was the Floridito Bar, which also is in Havana, old Havana. Ernest Hemingway lived in Cuba for 10 years. He hung out as a regular customer in this bar. Cuba is where he wrote Old Man in the Sea, which won the 1953 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction and the 1954 Nobel Prize in Literature. I brought a copy of it with me. It's just a little book, and I shared it with the people on our trip, but it's a delightful story. You probably remember a Santiago, an elderly fisherman fighting the giant marlin. So that was fun. And now I'm going to end with my second bucket list item, which was the salsa dance. I actually hired a private dance instructor here in the Berkshires before I left, because I was determined to salsa dance. 3 lessons I took. And I was too intimidated to dance like at the Buena Vista Social Club or any of the indoor places, but on 2 instances I did street dancing, and this was one of them. We went to a brewery. And while we were there, the band came outside, and I'm gonna go over here and hopefully this is gonna work. And they started performing on the street. Just 26 seconds. So anyways, Cuba is a powerhouse of dance. Okay, let me see if it's gonna go to the next one. Try here.
Laurie?
Yeah? Oh, geez, I wanna stop that. Pardon?
When was your trip?
Oh, January 5th through the 18th.
This year?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
just this year, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm Judith, I'm gonna need help getting to the next slide. I'm gonna just say about dance. Cuba is a powerhouse of dance, going back centuries. Dance is so fundamental to Cuban culture, it's like a second language. And there's all kinds of dance festivals if you go to Cuba. They have Folklorico, National Ballet of Cuba, which is world renowned. They have Haitian African Cuban dances, conga, which was introduced by Chinese immigrants, the mambo, the reggaeton, the rumba, and the son, the S-O-N, which I had never heard of before, is the predecessor to salsa. The son fuses, that's what they were playing, fuses the percussive instruments of Africa, including the claves and the bongo drums. And it's danced contra tiempo, so it's against the offbeat. So the times I did dance, I remember this man tapping my knee because I think I was offbeat. I think he was telling me, what I was doing. But anyways, he was delightful and I was able to follow him a lot. But yeah, it was great. So can we go to the next one? All right, so I'm at the end of my program. I just want to fast forward to Cuba today, just briefly. So yes, we were in Cuba from the 5th of January till the 18th of January. And while we were there, the US had invaded Venezuela. They arrested the president and they ceased all oil shipments to Cuba, which is a real problem because Cuba relied on Venezuela for 80% of its oil. And so now the Trump administration has reinstated Cuba as a state sponsor of terror. It's the country with no computers. It imposed visa restrictions on Cuba's labor export programs. There's now a total oil blockade. You probably know this. And if any country wants to sell oil to Cuba, they're going to slap a tariff on them. Last I heard, the Havana universities were closed. They now have multi-day long blackouts. Tourism has shut down completely. Intrepid Traveler and Rhodes Scholar have suspended all trips to Cuba. And Canadian Airlines, I mentioned that there was a big tourist place for Canadians. All their airlines have been suspended. And I recently learned another nefarious aspect of this recently imposed blockade. So the embargo was the one from originally, but the blockade is right now where no one can, we're really strangling Cuba. But this is something that I learned recently. And for decades, Cuban doctors have served many poor Latin and Caribbean countries by sending medical staff to train doctors in other countries and to provide medical care during medical disasters or infection outbreaks or what have you. But now this administration is pressuring Latin American countries to stop working with Cuban doctors and to cancel their contractual relations with these countries, some going back 50 years. And as a result, Cuban doctors are being expelled from host nations, contracts are being terminated, and health programs are being dismantled. And this was generating much needed foreign revenue for Cuba. So this was an important program. And sadly, many of these efforts have been successful because Guatemala, Honduras, Jamaica, Bahamas, Antigua, all of them have capitulated to this administration. Yeah. So I'm going to end, there's a couple of just my favorite memories. The pina coladas in Cuba are just to die for. Yeah, and there I am. Viva Cuba. Me encanta Cuba. I'm going to return. Yeah. I'm going to end with this. This is a short video, just 2 minutes of Guantanamero, which is sung by the Weavers. And it means women of Guantanamo. Yeah, 14. Yeah, Guantanamera. Want me to go to the next
Guantanamera.
No one.
Guantanamera. Guajira Guantanamera. Yo soy un hombre sincero. ¿De donde crece la palma? Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma, y antes de morir me quiero echar mis versos del alma. Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera. Was born in 1853. Jose Marti of Cuba was born in 1853. At the age of 17, he was exiled and spent most of his life
It's
away
Jose
from his
Marti.
home. When he was 42, he finally returned to Cuba, and within a year was killed in an abortive uprising. And this is one of his last poems. I am a truthful man, and before dying I want to share these poems of my soul. My verses are light green, but also flaming crimson. My verses are like a wounded fawn seeking refuge with the poor people of this earth. I want to share my fate.
El arroyo de la sierra me complace más que el mar.
Hey, you guys, join in.
Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera.
Okay, and I'm just going to end on a little bit of a positive note. Rainer, you remember him? He's our tour guide. I stay in touch with him on WhatsApp, and he told me, how everything had shut down with the tourism. And then lately, just this weekend, he told me that he's thinking of going back to teaching, which wouldn't be until September, but he's probably going to have to find a job before then. But then, when I asked him how he's doing, this is the Cuban, the irrepressible spirit. Yes, I'm doing okay. The situation is not the best, but we have to continue. What choice do we have? So there you have Rainer. And they also told me that the power outages are not as long as they had been, meaning that we have more time with electricity. And he's telling me so that's a good story. So, I was going to answer some questions if you have. You're gonna do that, right?
Yeah, if you've got questions in the room, you're gonna wait for the microphone, and we have a few online. Which one do you want first?
Do we have a question here? Well, we'll go online.
Okay, question from online. Is it possible to bring down to Cuba useful art supplies and tools from the USA?
I think so. When we went, we were encouraged to bring medical supplies and just like little packets with shampoo and what have you. So yes, you could probably hook up with organizations here in the US, nonprofits that are working with Cuba, but we just did it individually. But I think you can do that in a more organized fashion with a little bit of internet research.
You think now, still?
No, now probably not. Right now is not the time to be going to Cuba. No, this is in the future when it gets back to hopefully a more normal situation. Yes.
I was just gonna say, I was there, right? I was just there a year and a half ago. We took my whole family, there were 19 of us. We had an individualized tour. It was wonderful. It was the most incredible thing because we had ages 11 to 80. And everybody got something out of that tour. If you ever want to take your family somewhere, the kids saw something that they never experienced before. Every single one of us, and they individualized it for us. So they took us places that we were interested in taking, are going, and it was amazing. Very similar to what you saw.
What was your favorite part?
The music, I think. We went to a music school with children in it. And they had kids of all ages playing every instrument under the sun.
Yeah.
And they sort of had these primitive instruments and kids were making incredible music.
Yeah.
And it was also just watching how they, like you said, they didn't waste a thing. So they could maintain the cars, they maintained anything that was there.
Yeah.
And very positive attitude and very safe and good food.
That's how Cuba ended up on my bucket list for travel, because all my friends who have gone to Cuba, it's like their number one favorite place. You talk to people who've traveled to Cuba. So you have another question?
Yeah, there are a number of comments and questions online. We'll get to those. We can. Sorry, there's a question back here. What do the economic conditions in Cuba say about the communist government?
Well, that's interesting because I've been doing a lot of reading about Cuba, and I think my conclusion is while the Cuban Revolution did well on the social programs, they're promoting art and literacy and education and culture. On the economic side, I think they get failing grades. And of course, it's been tough, but I That's my 2 cents. I mean, I think on the economic side, they haven't been successful. Do you have something to add?
Yes. And we talked to a shop owner in depth, and he had an innovative ice cream shop, and also a couple of shop owners. And all of them said they had to fight the government constantly. Whatever they tried to do, the government would come back, tax them more. They had just nothing but difficulty trying to keep their business afloat.
Yeah, it reminds me of Rainer when you're talking about the Wi-Fi, because they're forever trying to get Wi-Fi access in Cuba. And apparently the government had just changed the process. They had Wi-Fi that was more accessible, and then they changed it and made it more difficult. And Rainer's comment was, whatever the government can do to make our lives miserable, they'll do it. So, yeah. Another question?
Couple more questions here about economics. I'll try and group them for you. One was whether there are still two currencies, one for Cubans and one for tourists. And a second question about reliance on oil from Venezuela, making them vulnerable, and if there was any evidence they're switching to solar power.
Oh, okay. So on the first one, I mean, I was aware that the two systems I saw were the pesos and then the US dollars or euros. But I think earlier there was another denomination that came from the government, but we didn't experience that. We've just dealt with the peso, which I said was 450 pesos to $1, which I'm sure is even worse now. And as far as oil and solar, I've heard other people tell me that they're moving in the direction of solar. I saw maybe 2 houses with solar on them. But, you know, there may be communities that are pursuing solar, and they can buy the solar panels from China, probably, but I didn't see that, but I have heard that also. Any other questions here? Is that it?
I had a question about if you know if there are still US medical students at ELAN, the Latin American Medical School.
You know, I don't. Early on, Rainer had told me that all 3 universities in Havana, which includes the medical schools, had shut down. Now, whether they've opened up again, I don't know. This was in light of the blockade. Yes.
I'm curious, the people that I know here that came before, as the revolution was starting, to the wealthier Cubans. And they're here in this country. And I'm wondering if they are still supporting people in Cuba.
Oh, I think yes, I think there's a lot of dollars.
They allowed to send money to
I think so, because I think people do rely, like, remember I talked about Sylvia, her son is in Buffalo, so he's getting money back to her. But there's that hardcore group in Miami, those are the ones that are keeping the embargo in place, you know, they're really controlling US foreign policy towards Cuba. But yes, I do think there is money exchange going back and forth, I don't know the details.
That whole, as you say, they're controlling, keeping the other people in Cuba is a very interesting dilemma. I mean, they got out, but they don't want anybody else to come.
No, they want to just stick it to the Cuban government. Yeah, they want the Cuban government, Fidel Castro and his brother and now his predecessor to lead, you know, they want that regime to collapse. Well, okay, I'm going to stop because you guys have been such a great audience. Thank you so much.
Great job. Yeah.